Record, share screen, PowerPoint. Yep. Okay, I'm starting. Hello, everyone. Today we are going to talk about the EU's migration and asylum policies with regards to securitization practices and the securitization migration governance. And especially we will talk about the period after 1990s and especially after the integration period. And the securitization discourse was becoming very important in after the securitization integration process for the European Union. And then we will see lots of examples or lots of summits regarding to this topic. And also we will see the kind of politicization of migration by giving implication to its impact on society and politics. So if we start with introduction, like migration and security nexus is like always a problematic area. I mean, the issue, especially after the end of Cold War, a new security discourse focusing on the migration issue has emerged within the Western societies. It's not just for the EU's migration policies and also for the United States, because it was very important for the Western societies to come up with a security discourse to kind of seize the immigration flows due to the end of Cold War. And then the settings of political and social atmospheres. I mean, the securitization of migration and also regarding the increase in international migration has become a prominent political agenda for especially the EU and also the United States. And this securitization discourse results from a very powerful dynamic of political and social kind of atmospheres. And it was presented, the migration was presented as something like a danger to public and cultural identity, economy, labor markets, and all kinds of layers of society and politics. So the securitization, the problematized securitization kind of governments kind of aimed to the reason why they kind of securitize migration is to preserve the existing structures within the societies and politics, and preserving their cultural identity by creating an European identity. For many scholars, I mean, after the integration period, the kind of opening borders for internal borders actually strengthened the external border issue. So the Fortress of Europe concept was emerging during those times, and it was very kind of enforced by the securitization of migration. And especially within this specifically within the EU's concepts. And after the integration period, there are lots of examples. And today we are going to discuss, and we are here with Dilara Akman, Ayesha Jamil, and Ahmet Hilmi Güler, and they will talk about the practices and they will give case studies. Dilara Akman will talk about the perspectives of France in 1990s and the following and the kind of developing the governance, migration governance after 1990s. And Ahmet Hilmi Güler will talk about the process after 2015, due to the European migrant crisis in 2015. And Ayesha Jamil will talk about the perspectives of European common policies, especially after the integration period, the union's period. And she will talk about the kind of Dublin regulations. I mean, she will give examples regarding to this topic. So, Ayesha Jamil, the floor is yours. You can start your talk.
Thank you so much, Oz. The development of a common migration policy in the European Union since the mid-20th century has been embedded in wider societal and political processes that articulate an endangered society. Western European welfare states in the beginning faced a multiplicity of challenges to their mechanisms of societal integration and political legitimacy. And these included economic and financial globalization, rise of poverty, deterioration of living conditions in cities, the revival of racist and xenophobic parties and movements, estrangement of the electorate from political class, and rise of multiculturalism. So, due to all this, migration has been increasingly presented as a danger to public order, cultural identity, and domestic labor and market stability. It has been securitized ever since. In the 1950s and 60s, immigrants were considered cheap labor in most Western European countries. Migration was not a politically delicate issue by then, but by mid 1980s, immigration was politicized because of the synthesis of immigration and asylum. Then, for many people in exile who seek asylum when they come to Europe, um, the word Dublin and all these conferences, it just like it brings to mind thoughts of a constant threat. And here I have basically explained that Europe has asylum policy and then immigration policy in two different ways. There's a different definition when it comes to the asylum policies of the European Union, and there's another definition when it comes to the immigration policy of the European Union. So when we move ahead to the Dublin conference, so next slide. Yes. So as I was saying, that all those people when they move towards Europe, and all those who are like in exile and who try to seek the asylum when they move towards Europe, this word, this Dublin, it brings to mind the thoughts of a constant threat which might knock them down at any moment. Far from evoking thoughts of the Irish capital, puts them back into endless procedures, continual suspicion, and fear of being sent back to a country where they don't want to live. And also there are two other important conferences, like for example, if I talk about the Amsterdam Treaty, which came into force in 1999. This was basically there to address the deficiencies of the Maastricht Treaty. And it was basically, there was an area where free movement of persons is provided, an area where appropriate measures are taken regarding external borders and controls and asylums. And then there's another treaty. We talk about the Tampere program. It was also there, and it was also initiated in the 1999. And the European Council convened Tampere for the implementation of the Amsterdam Treaty for the transformation of the Union into an area of freedom, security, and justice. So if we talk about the contemporary Europe, migration has become a meta issue in the political spectacle, has become a powerful theme through which functionally differentiated policy problems, they're all and the management of cultural diversity, they're all connected. And the discourses and governmental technologies reifying immigrants, asylum seekers, and foreigners as a dangerous challenge to societal stability also play a prominent, well, not exclusive role in connecting these different issues. And security policy is a specific policy of mediating belonging. It conserves or transforms political integration and criteria of membership through the identification of existential threats. Like Ole Weaver, he argues that in the European integration process, the fear of return of the 19th century European international system plays an important role in holding the European community of states and people together. And if I give another example, it is the conservative discourse which identifies multiculturalism as a cause of social disintegration. I think we all know about the best known version of Clash of Civilization by Samuel Huntington. It also mediates the differentiation between them and us by identifying other cultures that endanger the survival of the home culture. So that's it for me. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Aisha, for your very descriptive explanation for migration policies in Europe and the contemporary topics for the European Union. So, my dog. We can continue with Dilara Akman, and she will talk about the France perspective on migration and securitization. Dilara, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Oz, and thank you for all other participants bringing this great topic to talk about. I would like to talk about France perspective, starting from actually 90s. But before that, actually, we all know that France was like Germany and Italy received some people for as like guest workers. Back then, that securitization was not on the table. But when we come to 90s, we see that they had this threat perception regarding migration, and they usually had this threat perception towards irregular migration that wants to come France through some sea roads, taking sea roads. We can actually see that in both media agencies and also politicians, in their acts, they were always talking about how migration is actually damaging their values, like French society and French values. But if we are going to like separate securitization of migration in France, we can talk about two different aspects. First one would be about migration as institutionally securitized, which meaning that there are like couple of new laws and regulations were introduced, especially in 90s. One of them would be the one waiting areas in ports and airports, allowing border policies to take people to detention if they see any danger, and if they find out that these people are not like allowed to come inside of France. And this is why they actually located these detention centers to especially airports, because because they are just located in pure custom places. They don't have any obligation to those people as asylum seekers, because under refugee and human rights law, these areas are international zones, and as a partner of these laws, France doesn't have to any obligation to take those people in. Another one would be the Entry and Residence Condition of Foreigners in France Act. It also introduced in 1993, and they literally actually restricted some French territories, and limited people to reside in special some type of migrants to reside in France. And also we can see that detention centers, as it is also shown in the picture, they are still on running, and they still keep many people, thousands of people every year, without taking their asylum seeking claims. And it's actually usually they call it like police institution, because police border policies are the ones that they decide who is gonna be in or out. And also we can talk about, and as another aspect, several security practices that were put into places. These are including for example, numerous introduction measures that are including restrictive visa policies, and also some people who doesn't have any proper identity were not going to be allowed into France territories. But also we can see these securitization acts not only in 90s but even like 2000s, and they usually find their reflection in the speeches of some politicians, like from far right groups, far right wing parties, like National Front, but right now it's known as National Rally. And the leader of this party, for example, Marine Le Pen, always talking about migration from the security perspective, and they are always talking about some further restriction, considering stricter border controls and some restriction over residence for some migration or obtaining some citizenship. And they always talking about that France is always belong to French nationality, and these new arriving migrants, for the most of the time called for irregular migrants, are actually threatening their French values and French culture all the time. So we can actually conclude that France is always talking about this securitization of migration in a political sense, and they're always securitizing their culture, and also from the perspective of Islamophobia, because they usually receive migrants from the countries that are majorly Islamic. So thank you so much for the opportunity, and I want to give the floor for the next participant. Thank you
Thank you,
so much.
Dilara. Thank you for your great presentation. And you just cover all the France perspective regarding the securitization of migration. And you touch upon the very contemporary problems, as you said, the Islamophobia, the xenophobia. So thank you for your presentation. And now the floor is Ahmet Güler. The floor is yours. You can start with your presentation.
Thank you all participants for your comprehensive presentations. In the case of Germany, securitization discourse appeared after short-term conduct of desecuritizing practices. Through escalation of humanitarian crisis about Syrian refugees suffering from inhuman conditions and treatments, at first Germany embraced open door policy, admitting about 1 million asylum seekers in the country, which also reveals the securitizing discourse of Germany in the early 2015 because of these humanitarian concerns. However, with sudden and ever-increasing numbers of arrivals by refugees, Germany had to face social, political, and economic problems starting from late 2015. Therefore, we have witnessed not only public opinion, but also opposition political parties and the government itself started to perform securitization movements by having harsher and more restrictive measures against new arrivals of refugees, especially after January 2016 sexual assaults and July 2016 terror attacks. Afterwards, Germany have implemented tight border controls with other strong measures to diminish illegal entries. In this regard, the refugees increasingly began to be perceived as a potential threat for the Germans with adoption of securitization discourse. For example, we have witnessed the implementation of this discourse in the case of Islam and growing Muslim population in Germany. They are accused of prospective terrorism and extremism in the country. In this sense, we have witnessed a ban on headscarves on public areas, relying on depiction of it as a clear religious sign in some of the provisions of the Germany. Briefly, securitization discourse appeared presenting the refugees as a threat against state and internal security. Accordingly, securitization discourse also underlines prospective threats against social and economic well-being of the country unless the necessary precautions were taken. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Ahmet. It was very good presentation, and you kind of briefly summarized after 2015 and the perception of Germany regarding the securitization of migration. So to conclude our topic, to conclude our meeting, we can say that especially after the Maastricht Treaty and the integration period, we have the kind of a new agenda on the new agenda on migration. Aisha Jamil talked about the period of 15 and 60s, and the perception of migration started to change after 1990s, and especially with the integration process and the implementation of border control, enforcement of new visa policies for external migration, not for the internal perspective, but like as Dilara said, coming from different, especially from Middle Eastern countries, from Islamic background, the new policies regarding enforcement of border control and also visa policies, kind of the new ways for securitizing migration in the European content. So unfortunately, even though there are some initiatives, especially after 2010, there are some initiatives regarding the desecuritization of migration. However, still, this securitization of migration is a very important agenda for policy making and decision making. So we are still witnessing many dramatic and traumatic events in Mediterranean and also other borders of European, especially with the coronavirus issue. And I don't know what will happen in future, but we would witness some of the many dehumanized events, even in the borders and different countries. So securitization progress and discourse, I'm sure that it will continue to be kind of exist in the policy making. Thank you for attending in our meeting. We'll see you next time.